Welcome to the Fate Spun channel, a place where every story will make you feel, wonder, and hold your breath. Are you ready? Then go ahead. Story number 1, Voices Behind the Wall. My name is Jake, and I've always been a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural. But what happened to me recently has left me questioning everything I thought I knew. It all started when I moved into a new apartment in an old building downtown. The place was charming, though a bit quirky, like the paper-thin walls that let you hear every move your neighbors made. The first week passed without incident, but one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard voices. At first, I thought it was just my neighbors, a man and a woman arguing. Their conversation was peculiar. The woman was pleading with the man to stop, and his responses were cold and distant, almost unrecognizable as words. Curious, I got out of bed and pressed my ear against the wall. The voices stopped instantly. The next day, I ran into my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Lawrence, in the hallway. I asked her about the couple living next door. She gave me a puzzled look and said, "No one has lived there for over 10 years, not since the tragedy." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I brushed it off, assuming she was mistaken. However, the voices returned the following night, louder and more intense. I couldn't make out much, but the woman sounded terrified. This time, I decided to confront them. I pounded on the wall and shouted, "Keep it down!" The voices immediately stopped again, and for a moment the apartment fell eerily silent. Then I heard a faint scratching noise, like fingernails dragging across the other side of the wall. Terrified, I called the building manager the next morning to ask about the apartment next door. He sighed and told me the story. 10 years ago, a young couple lived there. They fought constantly. One night, the husband snapped and, well, he killed her. After that, he hung himself in the bedroom. He paused before adding, "You're the first person to move into the unit next door since then." I froze. The unit next door? I lived in the apartment he was describing. That night, I packed a bag and checked into a motel. As I was leaving, I swear I heard a woman's voice, faint and sorrowful, calling from behind the wall, "Don't leave me alone with him." Story number 2, The Window That Watches. When I first moved into my new apartment, I was thrilled. It was on the 12th floor with a panoramic view of the city skyline. But there was one odd detail about the place that unsettled me. The old window in the living room. It didn't open, it didn't even have proper latches, and the glass was thick, almost like it was meant to keep something out or in. At first, I thought nothing of it. I chalked it up to the building's age. But then, I started noticing things. Late at night, when the city was quiet, I'd hear faint tapping on the glass. It wasn't the rhythmic sound of branches or rain. There were no trees that high up, and the weather was clear. It was deliberate, like someone gently knocking, waiting for a response. One night, I decided to investigate. I turned off all the lights in my apartment, leaving the room bathed only in the glow of the streetlights below. I crept up to the window, heart pounding. At first, there was nothing, but as I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass, I saw it, a faint outline of a face, pressed against the outside of the window, staring back at me. I stumbled backward, heart racing. It wasn't possible. I was 12 stories up. Nobody could be out there. But when I turned back, the face was gone. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Stress from the move, maybe a reflection from something outside. But the following night, the tapping returned. And this time, it wasn't faint. It was insistent, almost angry. I ignored it, refusing to look. But as I lay in bed, the tapping moved down the hall to the window in my bedroom. I didn't even know that window opened to the outside, but the sound was unmistakable. I called the building manager the next day and asked about the windows. He hesitated before replying, "I should have warned you. People who've lived there before, they all said the same thing. That window was sealed shut years ago. They claimed it was the only way to stop whatever was outside." That night, I slept in my car. By morning, I'd broken my lease and left the city entirely. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that tapping on car windows, hotel rooms, wherever I go. It always finds me. Story number 3. The room at the end of the hall. When I moved into the old boarding house, I was warned about the room at the end of the hall. Mrs. Callahan, the landlady, was clear. That room stays locked. Don't go near it. Don't ask about it. I thought it was just one of those eccentric rules landlords come up with. Maybe it was for storage, or she didn't want anyone snooping around. Either way, I didn't question it. The rent was cheap, and the rest of the house seemed normal enough. The first few weeks passed without incident. I'd hear the usual creaks and groans of an old house settling, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then, one night, as I was brushing my teeth, I heard it. A faint scraping sound, like nails dragging across wood. It was coming from the end of the hall. At first, I thought it was a raccoon or some other animal that had gotten inside. I tried to ignore it, but the sound grew louder over the next few nights. Scraping followed by a low, rhythmic thudding, like someone knocking from inside the locked room. Curiosity got the better of me. One evening, when Mrs. Callahan was out, I crept down the hall with a flashlight. The closer I got to the door, the colder the air became. I pressed my ear to the wood and held my breath. At first, there was silence. Then, a whisper. "Let me out." I stumbled back. The voice was faint but unmistakable. It sounded human, but distorted, as if coming from a great distance. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I convinced myself it had been a trick of my imagination. But the whispers didn't stop. Every night, the voice grew more desperate. On the 5th night, I snapped. I grabbed a screwdriver and pried the lock off the door. As it swung open, a blast of icy air hit me. The room was empty, except for a small wooden chair in the center. But the walls were covered in scratches, deep, as if someone had been clawing to get out. I didn't wait to see more. I packed my things and left without telling Mrs. Callahan. I tried to forget about the house, but I couldn't. Not when I started hearing the whispers again. This time, they were coming from inside my closet. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and don't forget to leave a comment. See you in the next video. Good luck!